Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to the fifth episode of SatsOverCents. In a world where financial systems are crumbling, inflation is rampant, and trust in institutions is fading, one asset stands tall, and we know which asset that is, but let me state the obvious, it is the Bitcoin. Today, we'll explore how Bitcoin is reshaping economies, challenging governments, and becoming the ultimate store of value in an ever changing world, right? Whether you're curious about its global adoption, institutional support, or its defiance of manipulation, this episode is your guide to understanding why Bitcoin is the future. So let's dive in by asking a simple question to my friend Varun here. So, Varun, hello there. The question for you is why should anyone take BTC or Bitcoin seriously, especially at this price point?
Hello, everyone. Now let's straight away dive in. Yes, we all need Bitcoin is because the world cannot change Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can change the world. This was a very famous quote which was recently shared by Jack Mallers, who's the CEO of Strike. And when he said that, people who are not in this Bitcoin world, they wouldn't get it. We need to basically simplify this and so that it can be, understood by everyone. So to start with, like the world can change iPhones, like Apple can start making more iPhones, knowing that, if the demand goes up, the supply of iPhones can be manipulated. Same thing can happen with gold. Same thing can happen with stocks. Same thing can happen with real estate. But Bitcoin is the only finite asset that we have today, which is 21 million. This is always going to be 21 million. So this is why I feel that to match its demand, everybody will have to pay a higher price. So today I will be sharing my screen and I'll be showing you where the mainstream media is not talking about it. The reason they are not talking about it because think of it that there is a reason why we're not taught how to manage taxes in our day-to-day life. There is a reason why this is not being taught in our school or colleges because people don't want us to be financially literate. Similarly, there are countries who are holding bitcoins. There are public listed companies who are holding bitcoin as part of their balance sheet, but majority of us we are not even aware because mainstream media is not covering any of that. They've started now, I would say, just started discussing what's the price of bitcoin, like CNBC. But let me just show you my screen and let's take this forward.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
Assets by market cap. So we can see number one is gold, which is close to almost $18 trillion. And if you look at it now, Bitcoin has surpassed recently silver and Saudi Aramco. Now it is at number seventh, currently at 1.92, almost $2 trillion market cap. So, and very soon people are anticipating that at least, if not this cycle, probably the next cycle, because Bitcoin is considered digital gold, it is very soon going to cross gold's market cap. So when it crosses gold's market cap, I'm assuming by the time it crosses, it's going to be above some $20 trillion. That time, the price of Bitcoin is going to be roughly about, I would say, close to 800,000 to $1 million. Yes, and this can happen
Wow.
as fast as between 3 to 5 years. Knowing that this is the only asset which is finite. When the demand for gold goes up, people can start mining gold. And similarly with everything else. You look at these stocks, yes, if the demand is going up, they can increase the number of shares, right? But Bitcoin is the only asset which is finite. If you can see, this is another tab where it shows that countries that own Bitcoin. So number one is USA. It holds more than 200,000 Bitcoin, followed by China, which is very close to again to 200,000. Then UK, Ukraine, and I would say Bhutan, which is recently started disclosing that they are also mining Bitcoin. They have actually started accumulating almost 13,000 Bitcoins. Then El Salvador made it a legal tender, I guess, in the year 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And they've
Hmm.
been buying one Bitcoin a day, and currently they hold about 6,000 Bitcoin on their as a Bitcoin strategic reserve, right? And now there are more countries getting into it. So if you look at this by category, only ETF, which is roughly in US, it now has crossed Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin holdings. He holds about 1.1 million Bitcoins. ETFs alone has now crossed 1.2 million Bitcoins. And ETFs, let me remind everybody, ETF was just introduced in this year in the month of January, and it's not been a year yet. And they've just
That's
crossed that.
crazy.
And that
That is
roughly holds
crazy.
6% of the overall supply. You can see it on the right. So that is one. And now this there was a a recent tweet which was shared by Michael Saylor, which was November 30th. 60 public companies can issue equity to buy Bitcoin. So these are
Mm.
basically publicly traded companies which are holding Bitcoin as part of the balance sheet, and MicroStrategy being the number one, which is roughly close to now 387,000 Bitcoins. And you can
Wow,
see Tesla is at number five. They hold roughly about 10,000 Bitcoins.
that's amazing. So, Varun, let me pause you there for a second. These are really amazing stats and screenshots that you've shared with us so far. Going back to your first slide, where you shared that Bitcoin as an asset has surpassed Saudi Aramco, which is like an oil and gas company, one of the biggest gas companies or oil companies in the world. Yeah, this one. And it has passed the market cap of Tesla, Meta, and more importantly, which I was really surprised to see, was silver. So I guess this was bound to happen at some point, right? One question that pops in my head right now when I look at that chart where Bitcoin is number seven in that list of global assets, and the question is, Bitcoin's market cap has surpassed, some of the largest companies in precious metals as we saw there. Why do you think Bitcoin has been able to achieve this level of financial dominance in such a short time?
I would say, when, especially in a Bitcoin community, people get too excited that, when Bitcoin is going to be crossing new all-time highs. But people don't realize that there is a side to that is that there's gonna be chaos everywhere. People
Mm,
are losing trust in the traditional finance system. We've seen that time and again. They hold too much of power. They can block anybody's account. There are restrictions on
mm.
your own bank accounts. You have to take approvals and you have to basically align with their political views. And that is why we Bitcoiners, we believe that money needs to be separated from the state. Number one. Number two, I would say that because of money printing, we are spending our time, energy, and money to earn that kind of money, right? Which we're never going to get it back. And we all can see that irrespective whichever part of the world you live in, the people who are in the position of power, they're trying to take advantage of that. And now, everybody, because of internet, everybody's asking these questions. That why my money is losing its value every day. We know that CPI, which is the consumer price index, the inflation, is not accurate, so we know that there are a lot of numbers being manipulated. This is why Bitcoin will keep going up because Bitcoin has been correlated to a fiat currency which has no bottom because people keep printing, we keep increasing the supply of money, which is why we holding those assets or we holding uh, dollars will keep losing its value.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Yeah, I think so. The key call outs there, if I have to highlight, some of the words from the answer you just said, and the description you gave us before when I asked you, like, Bitcoin at the moment is such a high price. Why should somebody take Bitcoin seriously, and especially at this price? So I think the answer kind of boils down to supply and demand, scarcity of the asset, which is, as you mentioned, 21 million. At the same time, supply and demand, so demand going up because of various reasons, and you shared those, screenshots of MicroStrategy owning some 300,000, Bitcoins and so on. And also the fact that the element of trust is not there in the fiat anymore because the governments can print money. And so that kind of hedges your risk of anything that's happening at a macro level so that you still have an asset that you're invested in which is limited, and hence the value is going to go up. And we were briefly talking about financial freedom just yesterday, and one thing that came up was, hey, how does Bitcoin relate to financial freedom? And it was essentially either you have equity in a business rather than you're renting your time out and making a living, where if you don't work you don't get paid. But having that leverage where you are building equity or you have an equity in a business versus you invest your salary into an asset like Bitcoin, which will give you those exponential returns, right? So it's
Yes.
either or. Before, you didn't have a Bitcoin. You would have to, study the, stock market, invest in ETFs and so on. And then maybe if you're lucky, you might make some money in the stock market. So I'll give you an example. This year, Bitcoin has risen by 120%. Versus S&P 500, which is the stock market index of the US, the top 500 companies in the US, is only risen by 25%. So it still is a positive, uptick, but not as much as Bitcoin. And if you compare previous year, there's been many years where Bitcoin has beaten S&P 500 by miles. So I think that kind of brings us nicely into our next topic, which is how does Bitcoin's growing market cap redefine the concept of wealth on a global scale?
So eventually, I feel because once people, they start studying Bitcoin, whatever the capital which is available in the market, which is roughly about $900 trillion, and out of which 330 trillion, close to that number, it comes from real estate. Now, real estate has become the number one store of value. So I feel that a lot of money is going to flow in from that direction to Bitcoin because we know the drawbacks of holding real estate, right? First of all, we need to pay property taxes. There is a maintenance attached, wear and tear. It's not portable, and if I have to sell it, there will be capital gains tax and so on and so forth. With Bitcoin, there is no maintenance. You buy, you put it in the cold wallet, and you don't have to look at it. You can just leave it for your kids. It's generational wealth and so on, right? So I feel the first that is going to happen. And to answer your question, I would like to further, share my screen where I can show you a few more examples that, why the wealth will be moving towards Bitcoin. This is now the largest Bitcoin miners by market cap. So if you look at it, there are a lot of companies right now getting into mining Bitcoin. And now it has become there is actually a global mining war which is happening behind the scenes, and very few of us are aware about this. So I wanted to show you this. And I also wanted to show you a video where now, bricks are basically mining Bitcoin with government resources.
Can you just give quickly define BRICS for people who don't know what BRICS are?
So BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now there are basically there are a lot of countries now adding into it, Middle East and all of that. And collectively now BRICS has become bigger than the G7 countries as
Interesting.
compared to their population growth and the GDP and everything else. Yeah, G7 has been overtaken by BRICS.
Right.
Okay, here you go.
Yeah, it's a
Some people call that
look,
fairy
it's a
dust.
non-U.S. asset. It's an emerging markets asset. And while we were all hyperventilating about the election over the last week, BRICS had a conference in Russia. There's 6 new members of BRICS this year. So BRICS GDP is now greater than the combined GDP of G7. Of the 6 new members, 3 of them, Argentina, the UAE, and Ethiopia, are now mining Bitcoin with government resources. So there is tremendous urgency outside of the U.S. to find a way to circumvent the irresponsible fiscal policy that we've been running here in the U.S. In fact, Russia announced an initiative. Their sovereign wealth fund is going to invest in a regional initiative to build Bitcoin mining and AI infrastructure throughout BRICS with an idea of settling global trade in Bitcoin. So look, someday, I don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, Putin's going to die. We're going to look to reintegrate some of these countries into the world financial system, and they're going to be trading with Bitcoin. What are we going to be doing?
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope you all saw that video.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks for
So
sharing that.
basically, now what is happening? There are countries now holding Bitcoin as part of their strategic reserve stockpile, right? Number one. Number two, there are largest public listed companies holding Bitcoin. There are companies mining Bitcoin. There are now countries mining Bitcoin with the resources. So, and we all know that this is the only finite asset we have, which is 21 million. So the demand is still going to keep going up, 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 and up. And just to tell you where you asked me a question about why the price keeps going up and up. I just want to share another screen with you. So if you look at this 2011 and 2012 cycle, you look at 2014, 2016, 2019, 2020, and now 2022 and 2024. After the boring zone, which you can see, which is being highlighted, and then
Yeah.
there is a banana zone. So we are yet to, see that for this year. So if you ask me, there is a recent tweet by Vivek. He said that Bitcoin is going to 500,000 sooner than you think. And I tend to agree.
Hmm.
So, we are anticipating that Bitcoin's market cap should at least be half of what gold is today.
Wow. Okay. That's a big statement.
So I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, you did with a big statement. So, yeah, but again, this is not financial advice, and I don't want anybody to go and buy Bitcoin based on this advice. Please do your own research. So, moving on, talking about countries holding Bitcoin and Bitcoin being mined by government sovereign funds. Like, for example, El Salvador, you mentioned, has embraced Bitcoin as part of the reserved asset. Do you see other nations following this trend soon? Why and or why not?
Now, El Salvador did it because their currency is doomed completely. Similar thing is going to happen with Argentina, Brazil, Zimbabwe, Turkey, Egypt, Sri Lanka, or Pakistan, where their fiat currency is basically collapsing. There, you don't have an
Mm,
option. And let's say someone who doesn't have the tools and resources to open a bank account, what do you do? You know, so I feel that before the bigger countries start adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, I think so the smaller countries are going to do first. And we are in
mm,
that ripple effect. So I see Moroccan coming into, to be as part of that list. I see a lot of countries where basically fiat currency is losing its value, maybe because of inflation and maybe because of currency devaluation. Because of these two factors, I feel that it is going to happen. They say that gradually, then suddenly. So we are in that gradual phase now, and it's going to happen suddenly.
I see. I see. So I think from the stats and the screenshots that you were sharing, it does look like that, $500,000 of one Bitcoin, and the value of Bitcoin being $500,000, $500,000 is going to come sooner than we think. But coming back to the question of other countries, I think two things that I think I took from that answer was if you have high inflation in your country and if your currency is devalued, then you have to have Bitcoin as a reserve currency, a reserve asset on your balance sheet as a country. What if someone like the United States stands up tomorrow and says, you know what? I don't believe in this Bitcoin. I'm going to get rid of all of it. And they keep selling and they sell everything off. And after they've sold everything, they say, hey, we are out. We don't want Bitcoin anymore. What are the chances of that happening? A and B, what do you think will happen to the Bitcoin price or just general Bitcoin adoption?
Like I said, the world cannot change Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can change the world. So in the current Biden administration, they basically did not entertain Bitcoin. So this is one of the factors where Trump had to announce that they're going to be adding Bitcoin as part of their strategic reserve stockpile. And I would say that was one of the main factors that he got elected as the president who's going to take office in Jan 2025. So they no longer have that as an option because what is going to happen is, let's say you live in the United States and there are capital gains tax. People are going to move away to a country where they get more value for their money. So they cannot afford to do that right now. Yes, US is number one when it comes to GDP, when it comes to the economy. But to maintain that position, they have no other option but to make sure that they entertain Bitcoin. They try to change it. They try to neglect it, but now that is no longer an option.
Right. Right. And I think that's a great answer as well because you could be the US with the number one GDP and economy in the world. But if the citizen, let's say if I'm the citizen of the United States, I'm not, but let's say if I was, but if it's not serving me, I'm not going to be close to it just because I'm American. But if it's not serving me by being the number one economy or the country or GDP, then of course I'm going to look at other options where I will be served much better. And if that means investing in Bitcoin by moving into another country, if they choose to avoid Bitcoin or put some tariffs or sanctions on it, then I would consider moving to another country and starting over, where I think that I have an equal chance of winning than anybody else. And that's why I think Bitcoin is not just an asset, but I think it's an equalizer. It genuinely is an equalizer. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. But thanks for the answer. Moving on quickly to the next question that I have on that topic of countries holding Bitcoin. What risk or benefits do countries face when adopting Bitcoin as part of their reserve strategy?
I would say that there are no risk. If you look at MicroStrategy's, stock price, it has increased over 500% because they hold roughly 87,000 Bitcoin. So right now, basically, I don't know whether you heard this news or no, but Michael Saylor is going to be giving a 3-minute presentation on Bitcoin to Microsoft team. And they are in the talks of basically buying Bitcoin as part of their balance sheet because they were comparing that Microsoft is doing a lot of stuff, yet their stock price, the growth is way behind as compared to MicroStrategy. So this is something where which was recently on Twitter or on X platform. This was there that in one of those board of directors, that was the one question that would you be entertaining Bitcoin? Would you like us to be invested in Bitcoin asset class? I'm assuming it's going to be a positive response because purely if you look at numbers, that's how people get attracted. Now, see, there are a lot of friends and family who are not asking us today what's happening on the Bitcoin subject, but just wait for Bitcoin to enter six figures, and when it goes parabolic, and then you will have friends and family reaching us out and saying that, hey, are you still into this Bitcoin world? What do you think where the price is going? So people tend, like I said earlier, people actually buy Bitcoin at the price they deserve. And I have never met anybody who studied Bitcoin, who's given, a couple of hours or 100 of hours and, came back saying that I still don't trust this. Because you don't need to trust, you can verify it's a code. That's the beauty.
Right, right. That's a great answer. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, should we move on to the next topic? So, this is about, countries mining Bitcoin. You shared the stats and you showed us the presentation there. With mining hubs in the US, Kazakhstan, Russia, how does Bitcoin's decentralized mining network protect it from centralized control?
So the more people are mining, the better the security of the network is. That's why it's very important that, everybody should run their own node. And
Mm,
in that way, you have privacy and, and it makes the network better and stronger. And that's why if you look at, the hashing power of it, it's at all-time high. And usually price tends to follow. Right now, it's become so big that people like us, we can't even think of getting into mining because it'll be easier for us to just go and buy basically Bitcoin or Satoshis from it.
right, right. So I think by the sound of it, it sounds like it's like a man-made oil opportunity that countries have today by mining Bitcoin. Is that
Absolutely.
what
I
you're
would say
saying?
very well said. Yeah. Because why do you think they're trying to put Bitcoin as part of their strategic reserve? Because they're treating it like oil, they're treating it like gold, and Bitcoin is digital gold. And the beauty about this is finite and it's borderless, and you have 100% control over it. This is the only
So,
asset,
yeah,
nobody can take it away from you. And when you think about it, there is nothing else in this world which you control it or you own it completely. Not even one.
yeah, of course, by knowing, how to secure your Bitcoin that you have, through cold wallets and so on. Okay, that's good. And then, do you foresee any geopolitical tensions impacting the Bitcoin mining scene? Because, like the Saudi Arabia and the US deal for petrol that they had for so many years, which I think was recently not renewed. So, does decentralization make it resilient to these geopolitical threats?
I would say not at all. Because of this, Bitcoin, no country would want to go on a war with another country.
I'm sorry, when you say not at all, you mean not at all that they, you mean they can make it resilient and it will not be a threat.
It will not be a threat
Yeah,
because of the
right.
fact that they cannot manipulate the overall supply of Bitcoin. Now, why do you think that Ukraine and Russia in a war and Iran and Israel is there's war happening there as well? Because they are able to print money. That's why the
Mm,
countries can afford to go on a war. Imagine if they are not able to print money. They can't afford to go on a war, right?
mm,
Bitcoin solves all of that because they cannot manipulate the supply, and it's actually beneficial for countries to start mining Bitcoin, right? Especially from the renewable source of energy. And this was one of the reason, Eon had mentioned on X that the only time he will allow people to buy Tesla from Bitcoin is once it crosses above 50% when it comes to Bitcoin mining in renewable energy. And I think so that has already been crossed. So very soon you will see that you don't even need to transfer your coins to an exchange. You can directly start buying, and because it's a digital currency, the idea is to interact with it. It's a peer to peer. It's unlike, let's say, let's talk about Uber. What's Uber? It's the relationship between the driver and the rider. But Uber, there are tech giants in between who are taking maximum, I would say, commissions and gains and all of that. With Bitcoin,
Mm.
it's peer to peer. There are no third parties involved who will take advantage of that. And people are realizing this. So I think so. Decentralization is beneficial. And eventually, why do you think, look at El Salvador. They were the most dangerous city in the world. The country in the world. Now it is one of the safest I would say, in the entire, America.
Hmm.
El Salvador is I would say, is more safer than US. People don't know, but that's the truth because mainstream media is not covering it. And I would say one of the very good things Eon has done that he's freed the bird. I mean, last year or probably a year and a half or 2 years ago, he when he bought Twitter and he made it X. And I'm telling you, if you really want to know what's happening around the world in real time, X is the best platform to do that.
I see. So but coming back to your Tesla example of buying a Tesla car with your cryptocurrency would be Bitcoin. But it really is a love triangle then, isn't it? Because you can't buy crypto with crypto today. You can only buy crypto with fiat, right? So you're still earning in dollars or pounds or whatever that might be, which you use to buy Bitcoin and which you then use to buy Tesla. So it really is a love triangle, isn't it?
See, if you ask me, it's going to take a while. I would not say that the world is going to start functioning on Bitcoin standard. I think so it's going to take a while. But what I personally feel is that the dollar might be backed by Bitcoin, like how dollar
Wow.
was backed by gold and
Gold,
it was
yeah.
a gold standard. So yes, we can go on a Bitcoin standard, but then again, we will still have to use a fiat currency, but that fiat currency would be backed by Bitcoin. But let's say when there's an international trade happening, countries would just transfer Bitcoin rather than because that
Mm.
becomes the common currency for the entire planet.
Mm.
Right now, what is happening?
Yeah,
Oh, because Saudi doesn't want to sell any more oil, they want to do it with some other currency. All that will eventually will go away, and all international trade, everything will happen on one currency, which is Bitcoin. But for normal citizens, normal people like you and me, we will still have probably some kind of fiat currency, which would be backed by uh, Bitcoin. And I'm okay with that. As far as I have my Bitcoin in my cold wallet and I have total control over it, I really don't care. And I'm not
I
losing
see.
my purchasing value. I'm good to go.
Right. Okay. Okay, I think that's a good way to end this topic of the geopolitical tensions, impacting Bitcoin. Yeah. So, do you think this trend will accelerate, or there will be hurdles, institutions will face when adopting Bitcoin? So, what I'm trying to say is, in the top 500 S&P 500 companies, only let's say 1%, not 1%, maybe let's say 20 companies have adopted Bitcoin in part of the balance sheet. Do you see that trend changing by more companies adopting that, including the top 500 companies, or more than?
I would say eventually everybody will have to hold Bitcoin as part of their balance sheet because there are a lot of companies holding cash. And let's say, talk about Warren Buffett, you talk about Apple, they're holding a lot of cash on their balance sheet and they're losing 10% of that value every year, to say the least. So eventually they'll have to have some part of, their cash reserves into Bitcoin in order to safeguard themselves. Otherwise, they're going to
I
be left
see.
behind. Now think about MicroStrategy. What do they actually do? It was a software company, but now it's a Bitcoin company altogether, and it
Yeah.
has outperformed every company in S&P 500. It's number one. And there are data where every 10% increase in the money supply, 83% of the value of Bitcoin goes up
Hmm.
by
Say that
just
again. Say the last
10%.
sentence again.
If there is an increase of money supply by 10%, the price of Bitcoin increases by 83%.
Wow.
And we
Wow,
know
that's
that 7 to
crazy.
10% of money supply has been increasing every year. If
Yeah.
I have to tell you that in last 4 years, for nearly 40% of dollar what that you see today in circulation, that was printed in last 4 years.
Wow. Okay, great. Super, super facts. Love your factual information, Varun. Should we move on to the other topics? So, for example, one thing, you mentioned about Venezuela and Argentina and so on. I know you said that it used to be a high crime country, El Salvador, and now it's the lowest. Can you give us an example of how has Bitcoin emerged as a lifeline for these regions and these countries?
See, if you take your example and my example, forget about those countries at the moment.
Hmm.
Right now, we all are struggling with number one is taxes. You and I, we
Hmm.
both know that direct and indirect taxes takes away 50% of our paycheck. So when you
Yeah.
talk about that, it's your time and energy as well, which you're not going to get it back. Number one. Number
Hmm.
two, we see inflation. Again, inflation, they say 2%, 3%, but technically, it's in double digit, right?
Hmm.
Lastly, it's currency devaluation because we cannot control the supply of money being circulated in the market. So everybody is struggling. More or less, I would say there are very few people after paying their bills and also making sure that their standard of living or quality of life is also going in par with their annual income. There are certain factors which they see that we are in middle of a robbery and people don't realize that. So eventually those countries are being highlighted because where they have no other option but to use Bitcoin in order to safeguard themselves, where nobody's accepting the local currency. It's become worse than toilet paper has more value than that. So now in developed countries, this is happening where majority of them are moving away from the traditional financial system because they saw what happened with the truckers in Canada. They saw what happened in India with demonetization and all of that, and you know, and that's not it. They have more control. It's your money. It's your taxed money. What you buy, you pay tax. You make profit, you pay tax. You send to someone else, they also have to pay taxes. So as people are getting educated, people are getting more financial literate. Everybody's going to be basically on Bitcoin.
Any final thoughts?
Sure. We've spoken so much about Bitcoin, but I would just say that Bitcoin is not just an asset, it's a revolution. It's in a world where everything from food to currencies can be manipulated. Bitcoin standalone is the only asset which is scarce, engineer asset, immune to any kind of interference from anybody. Nations are adopting it, institutions are embracing it, individuals are finding financial freedom through it. So the question is no longer if you should be on Bitcoin's team. It's why aren't you there already? And that's it from my end. Thank you so much for tuning in to SatsOverCents. Until next time, be humble, stack those sats, and stay ahead of the curve. Ciao.